A very warm welcome to you this afternoon. I'm Councillor Jane Scullion. I'm the leader of Calderdale Council and I'm the chair of the Climate, Energy and Environment Committee. And a very warm welcome to those who are joining us for the first time. We've just had a brief discussion, the director and I, and because it's an extremely well-attended committee, we did think about the usual going round, plus icebreaker and what you had for breakfast, but we decided that was actually going to take a little too long. So I think when you speak for the first time, if you perhaps could just introduce yourself at that moment, your name, if that's acceptable. But for those of you who are attending for the first time, a very warm welcome. Now, the first item on the agenda today is apologies for absence. Beg your pardon. Just to say, you will have had this in your invitation, but just a reminder that at the rising of this committee meeting, there is a short workshop for committee members. So if you can possibly stay for that, if you can remember not to rush away, that would be great. Okay, on to item 1, apologies. Rotimi, can you confirm whether there are any apologies this afternoon?
Thank you very much. Leah Stewart and Ian Holmes.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Councillor Sokal. May you introduce yourself first?
No,
as
it's
well?
okay. Sorry, I'm here for Councillor Tyler Hawken from representing Kirkley Council. I'm on the Kirkley Council for a long time, 36 years. Yeah. Longest serving council on Kirkley Council. I'm here for Councillor Tyler Hawken. I'm not taking too much time. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Sokal, and it's Kirkley's Council, and we thank you for your service. That is impressive, actually, 26 years. And I'm sure we'll meet Councillor Hawkins in due course. Thank you, Rotimi. Next item is declarations of interest. Is there anybody on the committee who's got interests that they wish to declare in any item on the agenda? Gideon.
Yeah, Gideon Richards. I don't know if it is a conflict of interest, but I'll say it anyway. So my wife, Councillor Suli Richards, sits on the one of the White Rose Forest committees. Whatever it is, I don't know, but she's on it, so just so we know.
Thank you, and that is an item on today's agenda, so thank you just for making that clear. I don't think it's a pecuniary interest in any way, but thank you for being clear. Neil.
Neil Wall, Northern Gas Networks. Similar vein to that, but a founding member of White Rose Forest. So just declare that.
Thank you, Neil. Any more for any more? Nope. And there aren't any items on flooding on the agenda, so I don't have to do my usual flooding declaration. Thank you. Moving on to item 3, exclusion of the press and the public. And I understand there are no exempt items today, which means we can just press on as normal. I just wanted to say that there are no financial decisions on the agenda this afternoon. And the items before you in the committee are for endorsing or for noting, to give your input or to steer the work in a particular direction. And with your permission, committee, I'd very much like to try and allow enough time for some of the items that are later on the agenda to do with transport, because I do know that this committee were keen to actually just have their hands across some of the links between the climate agenda and the transport agenda. So perhaps if we were very brisk in the first half of this agenda and then move on to the transport items. So my next item, not seeing any dissension, my next item is the minutes of the meeting held on the 25th of March. Any members have further comments or questions on those? Fatima.
Hello everybody, this is my first meeting. My name's Fatima Khan Shah. I am the Mayor's Inclusivity Champion. Chair, I just wanted to draw colleagues' attention to paragraph 17, referring to the Chair's update, just to clarify, I think, a miscommunication reflected in the minutes. I was awaiting the notice to committees to inform people of my not attending the meeting last time, but the way in which it frames suggests that I was invited and I chose not to attend, which I would never dream of doing in a meeting that you're there. So I just wanted it to be amended to sort of reflect the accuracy, which was that I intend to attend future meetings, and here I am.
Fatima, thank you very much for that, and we're really glad to have you. Rotimi, can you make sure that the minutes are amended, if that's accepted? Are we content with that correction to confirm these minutes as an accurate record?
Just want to raise something just raised with me in Leeds is, I think Councillor Hemingway was on this committee from Wakefield and raised something about producing some sort of smart targets and maybe producing, given the reports are very comprehensive, but perhaps producing something like a plan on a page when big reports going forward.
Thank you. And that sounds like a very good idea, and the kind of thing that we do in the West Yorkshire Combined Authority anyway. I was on sick leave at the last meeting. Councillor Patient and Liz, I'm looking to you in terms of Councillor Hemingway's comments. It obviously wasn't recorded.
Chair, I think I'm aware of the email thread where this might have come from, and maybe perhaps we can take it offline in terms of how we manage it. I think some of that is already happening, but I think this might be for a specific item that this was being brought to the attention, so we'll pick it up afterwards. Is that okay?
Councillor Rafiq, is that okay to take it off online? Thank you for that prompt. Really appreciate it. Okay, content to confirm these as an accurate record? No? I'm seeing nods. Thank you very much. Now, moving on to item 5. This is actually the first committee of the municipal year. It's not the same as the calendar year. It's not the same as the financial year. It's this peculiar animal called the municipal year. And of course, in a normal year, this would have been after the elections. And we have long history to a fallow year in terms of local government elections. And of course, there were no mayoral elections this year. So this is the first meeting of the municipal year, hence this item in front of you this afternoon in terms of reference and membership of the committee. And I want to say, first of all, to those who served last year, thank you for serving on the committee, and thank you for your contributions. I'm sorry illness meant that I wasn't able to be at all of the meetings, but I have enjoyed tremendously and really appreciated the contributions that you've made. Thank you. And we have then in front of us the setting out of the arrangements for the governance for the committee this year. It has already been to the full West Yorkshire Combined Authority. So this is in fact already agreed, and it's here for the committee to note the terms of reference and the membership. Key thing I want you to make sure that you have, whether you're a main member or a substitute member, the key thing I want you to have is the dates for the coming year that are already fixed. Now, there may be other workshops or other meetings, but these are the dates of the main full committee, and that's the 22nd of July, the 4th of November, and the 17th of March. So, 22nd of July is today, of course, the 4th of November and the 17th of March. As I say, we do have other meetings in and between, and indeed a number of workshops and similar events. But if those key things, and of course they only go up to March because of course there is another round of political elections, excuse me, in May 26. Now, in terms of the report, you'll see there is both the terms of reference, which are unchanged, I think, from last year, and there's also the membership table. And I have got still a couple of queries, and I don't know if officers or those present can fill in the necessary names. We're still waiting for subs to be confirmed from Leeds Council and York Council. Do we have any further information on those? No. No. Okay, well, we'll wait for those and look forward to seeing those folks. Any comments or questions? Fatima.
Just to acknowledge, Chair, that as the Mayor's advisor on inclusion, that I have the opportunity and privilege of attending all the committees, but it's not reflected within the list of members. So it's just to reflect that I hope to continue to be able to attend the committee with the support of yourself.
Lovely, thank you. And can that be recorded and perhaps just picked up in terms of the other committees, because I know there's a few coming up, just to make sure that that's properly represented. Thank you. Not seeing anybody else on this item, and the recommendation is that the committee notes the governance arrangements already approved by the combined authority. So if people are content, I will then move on to the Chair's update on item 6. And I wanted to just update on some key work streams for the committee. But first of all, I wanted to reflect on the continuing drought conditions in the region. And if there are any climate change deniers in the room, I think some of the extreme weather events we're having might help to change their minds, really, in terms of, we had flash flooding in Calderdale yesterday at the same time as we are having a drought. And as members of the committee will be aware, a hosepipe ban came into place on the 11th of July. And I, very sadly, as the leader of one of the district councils, had to sign the order which basically stopped all the water play in our parks as a not essential, you could argue the point, not essential use of water. And I know that other authorities have had to do that thing. And the region's officially in drought conditions, and these announcements follow the driest spring on record. And those records go back a very long way. And obviously, we know this because we know a lot about flooding and catchment and water supply and water assets like reservoirs and the distribution network. Actually, the usage of this resource and the importance of this resource by our local communities, our local businesses is absolutely key. And some of you will remember the drought in, was it 95, 96? And I do remember, for example, old people's homes having to have bottled water, Bowsers coming into communities and streets, and there actually being some unrest and unhappiness around those things. I do hope that we won't be in the same situation again, but clearly we know how important that is. And if you see the reservoirs, for those of us that are in the uplands and the hilltops, what is in the reservoirs is just extraordinary. It would take a very long time to fill those reservoirs up. And linked to this, DEFRA are currently consulting on changes to the funding approach for flood risk management. And one of the elements of that consultation I think you might be interested in is thinking not just about the building of new assets, obviously that we're talking about, and new assets particularly in relation to flood risk management, walls and culverts and so on. But one of the elements that DEFRA are consulting on is how we maintain existing assets. And I think investing in new capital infrastructure is really important, and investing in natural flood management is really important. But actually there are things like reservoir walls, you know, our pipe system, what's underneath our highways and so on, thinking about our current assets and how we make sure You know, if you look at the map, I don't know if it's there, it's over behind Mia at the end of the room. If you look at the map of West Yorkshire and you see our enormous rural hinterland where we have so many reservoirs and we provide clean water to so many cities and towns and villages, actually how important that is to us here in Yorkshire. So I really recommend that in your organisations and your councils that you take a look at that DEFRA consultation, particularly around the question of how do we make sure that our assets are properly protected. I just wanted to say, before I leave the question of drought, it's really hard as a politician to, for people that you talk to in your boroughs to get their heads around the fact that it's raining, they're not allowed to use their hose pipes, the children's play parks have got no water features, and there are water burst pipes in the streets. And actually squaring that circle and trying to explain people why actually the hose pipe ban is important, that we do reduce our water usage, is really hard. And as a country, and in terms of our infrastructure, we need to really get to grips with that. And when there was a cloud burst yesterday and we had flooding of some of our highways and things like supermarkets, car parks yesterday, people were moaning a lot about the drought and the hose pipe ban. Okay, so I'm just going to quickly move on to another couple of items in my chair's report. One of them is in relation to biodiversity net gain, BNG as the officer's abbreviation has it. And just to flag up the introduction of the mandatory biodiversity net gain requirements that we all have to meet. And it's a very significant shift for developers. And again, DEFRA, the department, want to explore some early opportunities to reduce what they call process burdens, what you would also call red tape and bureaucracy, in terms of trying to deliver for nature in an area like West Yorkshire, but also make sure that the whole system doesn't become so bureaucratic that it doesn't work for anybody. And they're particularly looking to see where changes could be implemented for small and medium-sized developers. Now that's important to us in West Yorkshire. We of course love Barrett's and all of the big volume house builders, of course, but we also know that we have a number of other small and medium-sized enterprises in West Yorkshire. Now, the officers in the Combined Authority are coordinating with the planning officers in the districts, trying to develop a response to the consultation and just see how we might actually look at small-scale developments and biodiversity net gain, and how do we make that bearable and manageable for small developments, because I certainly know that in places like Calderdale, where you're doing infill and you've got land, small amount of land that doesn't flood and isn't on the hilltops, it's really important to think about that. We don't want to see those often very, very good, very sustainable developments stymied because of the biodiversity net gain. That would cancel out the good things. So your views are very much, again, take a look at that DEFRA consultation, talk to the Combined Authority officers and just see if there's some suggestions we've got. Gabriel, can I bring you in?
Yeah, thank you for that. Just a quick one, and when we say developments, we hope we're not just talking about housing, because we've got an issue at the moment with a community centre where the biodiversity net gain is just going to mess up everything. So I think it's the whole side of it.
Thank you, Gideon. Apologies for calling you Gabriel. I don't know whether I'm having a senior moment or whether it's chemo brain, but there you go. Thank you. That's really helpful. No, I didn't mean to imply that it was just housing, actually. But I didn't want to go down the rabbit hole of HS2 and bat tunnels either. Very quickly, again, the Combined Authority officers here met with DEFRA to discuss the timeline for the local nature recovery strategy. And this question of actually trying to merge our timelines, I think, is an interesting one just to think about quickly, because we've got local authorities and their local plans and strategies. We've got the combined authority, and we've got DEFRA, and they're all marching to a different beat, a different drum. And sometimes we have to delay things or hasten things up in order to meet these timelines. And the combined authority officers have been discussing the timeline we had for the local nature recovery strategy work. And there is, it says in my notes here, strong ministerial pressure to have the strategy in place by December 2025. And of course, our timescale for the local nature recovery strategy are beyond this milestone. So we've had to do what the officers call refresh the programme, and we've had to bring in some additional help, and we've revised the timeline. It's been shared with DEFRA, and it's now going to be for public consultation. Look out for it. It's going to be 4 weeks between October and November 2025, with the aim of coming to the Combined Authority and this committee for approval and publication in March 2026. So just to give you a heads up that we're basically going to try and align with the DEFRA. Always a good idea, align with the DEFRA requirements. And my final item on the Chair's report is a brief update on the local area energy plans, which I keep wanting to call LEAP, but the acronym does not work. Local area energy plans. And as committee, those of you who've been on the committee for some time will know that work has been progressing over the last 12 months in Bradford, Kirklees, Leeds and Wakefield. Calderdale had already done those early doors. And it's basically a spatial representation of the interventions that are going to help move us towards net zero carbon by 2038. And the development of a pipeline of schemes. We've used that term again and again. We have to be ready when the newish government is giving money to the region and to districts. We have to have a set of schemes that actually work, that have done the business planning, which will enable us to draw them down from government and also to secure funding from other organisations and private sector investments. So the local area energy plans, they're nearing their conclusion. The final outputs are expected in early autumn, and a paper to the next meeting of the committee in November. And I think that will be quite significant in terms of giving us the whole of West Yorkshire local area energy plans. It gives us a very visual, I think, geographical representation of where we are that I think will allow us to plan further. And that's the end of my Chair's report. Thank you. I'm not seeing anybody indicate. We're going to move on to our steady item on our agendas, and that's monitoring indicators. And there's been some interesting things. There's always, this paper comes with a health warning. There is always a time lag in terms of the data and the data collection, so we are looking at the past, but it enables us to try and plan for the future. And key focus of this particular report is the latest set of local greenhouse gas emission statistics. And Guy and Matthew are going to introduce the paper, so over to you folks.
Good afternoon, thank you, Chair. So I'm Guy. The purpose of the report, as usual, is to present the latest data we have on the state of the region monitoring indicators that are associated with climate, energy and environment, and we'll focus on the carbon emissions on the presentation. They were published this month by government. It's 2023 data, so we have to take that into account. The paper itself also includes data related with the number of boiled upgrade scheme, grants paid, electric consumption, renewable energy capacity, and EV charging infrastructure. So I'll do the presentation on the greenhouse gas emissions, and then I'll pass the word to my colleague Matt, so we will explain how our current trends compares with the carbon emission reductions pathway. So in 2023, greenhouse emissions, the total emissions in West Yorkshire fell by 4.5% compared with the previous year, and we have been in a downward trend more or less since we have data, 2005, with the exception of 2021 that we had an increase, but partially because the first year of the pandemic emissions fell quite strongly because of restrictions. Compared with 2019, so pre-pandemic levels, we are 18% below the emissions, and our trend in general is very similar to England. So they fell 5% this year, and they are 15% below what they were in 2019. So pre-pandemic, we declined a little bit more than England. On a per capita basis, we do emit less than England, 4.1 carbon tons of CO2 equivalent per resident compared with 4.8. And the major difference between West Yorkshire and England in 23 has been the same as the previous years, is that we have significantly lower emissions related with waste and agriculture. From the gap we have, it's more or less 55% of that difference comes from these two, which has more to do with our urban background compared with England as an average. In terms of local authorities, Wakefield still emits more emissions than England's average. It's the only local authority that emits more, and it's mostly explained by high emissions on industry and transport. So we know that our energy-intensive industries in Wakefield, and transport has also to do with main roads. So we account to emissions that are not done by our residents, but are modeled in this area. And there's a very important logistics hub as well. In terms of the sources of the emissions, most of them faced a decline in 2023, with industry and emissions associated with buildings falling the most. And when we look back to 2019, domestic emissions, so the ones that we emit at home, had the sharpest decline. Transport is the most interesting in my opinion. It just fell 0.5% last year, so it's mostly stable. It is 15% below what it was pre-pandemic, but we don't observe a downward trend as most of the sectors. As it was quite stable between 2005 and 2019, and then there's a decline with the pandemic and then gets stable again. So it has been the most challenging one of seeing an actual downward trend on a permanent basis. As a consequence of that, transport-related emissions now are the largest source in West Yorkshire, 36% of them all, while in the past domestic emissions used to be the largest contributor and now are 27%. In terms of emissions intensity relating with how much economic output we generate per unit of carbon, we have been in a downward path as well, but in this metric we have more emissions per GVA generated than England, but we have been converging. This has to do with our economic structure, so more we are more towards manufacturing, but we have been shifting to services, and our carbon emissions have been converging with the England's average. And now I would pass to Matthew to interpret the data compared with the carbon reduction.
Thank you.
Okay, thanks very much. I thought I'd just quickly walk you through this graph. I thought I'd just quickly walk you through this graph. It's a little bit more complicated than some of the others. So the red line is the historic greenhouse gas emissions as reported by DESNES, and that's the data set that was published earlier this month. I've chopped it up at 2010 and squashed it up a little bit, and that's to allow me to put in the pathways out to 2040. Now you remember that there are two carbon emission reduction pathways studies. I've termed them SERP1 and SERP2 on this graph. SERP2, the most recent one, includes a baseline, a sort of business as usual emissions forecast, and a pathway which gets us most of the way to net zero by 2038, and those are both shown on this graph. The blue line is the original SERP study, Max Ambition. You may remember that had 3 scenarios. They were Max Ambition, High H2 and Balanced. Max Ambition was the most stretching of those scenarios, and as you can see, that's very similar to the SERP 2 pathway. Okay, so what does this tell us? Broadly speaking, the most recent emissions data that we have is in line with both the Max Ambition and the SERP 2 pathway in terms of reductions towards a net zero by 2038. But we're relatively early in this time series, so it's very difficult to say for definite where we're going. The next few years will, I think, perhaps reveal whether we're more towards the baseline, more towards the SERP 2 pathway. So we await further data with interest.
Thank you, Matthew. Questions on the officers' introductions and presentation, or on the paper as a whole?
Yeah, thanks for the data and thanks for the update on that. I just wonder how much is being influenced by things like, I was reading in the report about transport, and we'll come to that later, but electric vehicles and the change from that, and also the decarbonisation and the intensity drop in the overall electric through using renewables and things like that. Do we have anything in terms of that data and how that fits with here in West Yorkshire?
Matthew?
In terms of electric vehicles, penetration of electric vehicles is still relatively modest, so I don't think that would have made a very significant change, but we would hope to see a reduction in transport emissions going forward because of that. In terms of renewables, I suspect that has made a difference. Certainly it has historically, with the change in power generation from fossil fuel power generation more towards renewables and green sources of energy. So yes, I think that has made a significant difference over the years.
Can I just pick up one or two things that are later in the paper, perhaps? In the paper you talk about the boiler upgrade scheme, and in terms of the region's uptake being lower than the national average. And I mean, just thinking about what's within this paper in terms of looking at the monitoring indicators that gives us some directions for the future work of this committee. Right? Sort of, so boiler upgrade scheme and our uptake being less than the national average, although more than some other combined authorities perhaps. The other thing that's mentioned is the generation of renewable energy, which is perhaps a bigger subject and one for a paper for a future meeting. Electric vehicle charging, which if one was being charitable would describe as a mess and a muddle nationally, but something that I think we as a committee need to think about as a combined authority. And then the question that you touched upon, Matthew, in terms of pace and scale, really, the challenge for this committee is not about the good work that's being done in some ways, but how do we use the small public sector funds we've got to get pace and scale and roll out, and maybe it's something we'll come to later on the agenda. So I'm just going to, I'll give you a minute to think about those things, and I just wanted to bring in Councillor Patient first as well.
Thank you, Chair, and you've covered a little bit of what I wanted to say about EVs, and I think the issue is the infrastructure and the back end and the contractual arrangements, which I know all of West Yorkshire and the country's dealing with. I think bottoming that out is going to be really important to make sure we hit national policy and legislation targets, so let's not get forgotten about that. But thanks for the report. Just one thing to pick up really is it's from 2023, and I think that probably reflects one thing that hadn't quite happened at that point, which is about the energy demands from data centres and the use of AI. And now I appreciate that's just one demand on the electrical infrastructure. You know, EV infrastructure will be another one. General energy demands rising as populations grow and change will be a thing. But I hope that we can try and, what's the best way to say it, have our cake and eat it, use AI in the best way we can as an organisation and encourage others to, but also make sure we're doing it smartly. So we know that developing images is a lot more energy intensive than it is text, or developing, you know, policy, or where there's writing involved. So while we're thinking about people's jobs and not putting graphic designers and photographers out of work, can we also think about how we use AI smartly as an organisation that isn't data hungry at the same time? Thank you.
Right, Matthew or Guy, do you want to I know you're just messengers, but do you want to come back on any of those points?
Great point on the data centers. In the next, we want to have the specific data, but maybe on the sub-industry and the locations, we can start understanding if it is moving the dial upwards or not, because industrial emissions have been going down. It could be one of the ways. On the EVs, we do underperform, but on the I just want to highlight the silver lining. On the rapid charging points, we are in line and we are making progress, which is positive. Boiler upgrade scheme, we and most of the combined authorities are underperforming. We looked at the places that are getting most grants. They are quite rural, and it seems to be related with how energy is generated, how heating systems are. So they tend to be much more reliable on diesel. So we assume that grants are being prioritized for those, and not so much that we are not applying or something like that. Yeah. At least geographical, when we look at really low-level geographies, suggest that. Yeah, that's all.
Thank you. Any other points? Gideon and then Adam.
Yeah, it's probably worth following through with that and saying that if we look at electricity and we talk about electricity and we don't talk about overall energy, then we might find that our energy is going up, especially in homes, in some respects, because we've got heat pumps and we've got other things going on that, while we'll reduce our overall energy, are actually showing us as more now. That's not for those with batteries, by the way, but you know, there's dynamics in here that we need to look at a bit more nuanced, I think, in terms of what's happening. In terms of EVs, I think anecdotally I would say that we have a huge amount of the EVs in this area. We're falling over them, right? We get a lot of them. And while a lot of the infrastructure seems to be a model, actually it's sorting itself out over time. I don't know how that fits with the local authority side of it, but I know our local authority and the infrastructure they put in is not really utilised.
Thank you. Adam, do you also want to introduce yourself, please?
Yeah, hi, I'm Adam Ashburn from Yorkshire Water. Couple of questions, but just to pick up on what Gideon was saying, I guess as range improves in vehicles, then the infrastructure charging becomes, or the scale of infrastructure becomes less of an issue, because hopefully we can all use home charging, which would be lovely. But yeah, I had two questions. One, in terms of the data, it says it represents territorial emissions, and I just wondered, is there any plans for monitoring non-territorial emissions and the trend in those, or at least observing them? And then the second one was just around the different sectors. So I was just suspicious of the agriculture sector line. It looks like it's been drawn with a ruler, and I wondered if how confident are we in that data, and is there anything to examine further there? Thank you.
Thank you. Guy and Matthew, do you want to come back on any of those?
On the territorial emissions, I don't think there are plans from government to. This is modelled, and I think it's the easiest way they had so far. So things like transport change a lot, right?
Yeah.
And on second question was on
agriculture.
Yeah, it's very small, the emissions that we have. I think has to do with we have a quite small sector here. And the smaller these things are, I think probably the marginal errors are probably larger because it is model maybe. But yeah, it's quite small because I think it has just to do with the profile of our combined authority itself. So.
Okay. And just in terms of the residual emissions beyond 2040, how much of that is agriculture, and is there a decline due? I'm just thinking it's been flat for so long.
Do you know that one?
I don't know that.
No. Okay.
Okay, well, having flagged that question up,
But
we'll take it away. Matthew.
Just very quickly on territorial emissions, you're absolutely right. These are emissions from within West Yorkshire. That's important for the transport sector, where a lot of the emissions come from the strategic road network and from interurban rail services, which are to a large extent outside our control.
Yeah.
So I think in terms of transport, a lot of the levers that you might want to pull in terms of incentivising EV take-up and in terms of trip making, longer distance trip making, are difficult for us to pull.
Okay.
Okay, I'm not seeing anybody else indicate, so the committee are asked to consider the content from the monitoring indicators. I think that's given us a basis in terms of thinking about some of the future work, and it is very important to just keep our eye on the monitoring indicators. I know that people think the data is dull. It really isn't. It really isn't. In this context, it is so important. So, our committee happy to note that report? Thank you. Okay, if we move on then to item 8, White Rose Forest, and we are asked to endorse the strategic plan. This is a plan for 25 to 2050. Sort of, in terms of the future, this is maybe not my future, but certainly my children's and my grandchildren's future, which is why we're here. This has already, I think, been to all of the local authorities for discussion and consideration there. Justin Wilson from Place and Environment Policy Team is going to present the paper this afternoon. Over to you, Justin.
Thank you, Chair. Hi everyone, good afternoon. I'm Justin Wilson, the Policy Manager for Environment at the Combined Authority. I think I'm in the first half of the meeting, so I'll keep in this item brisk as well. Good. So just quickly in terms of the context, as I think you touched on at the beginning, obviously politically and through the Mayor, we've pledged to tackle the climate and environmental emergency alongside supporting the White Rose Forest programme. And the Combined Authority should be noted as a signatory to the White Rose Forest Partnership Agreement, so we're very much embedded in the delivery of this piece of work, and it does align with a lot of the other activities certainly my team and the wider organisation are doing. The strategic plan itself, it articulates the broad benefits of tree planting and woodland expansion, both from an environmental, economic and social point of view. And some of these benefits and co-benefits, as we tend to call them, are also drawn out in the emerging local nature recovery strategy, which was touched on at the beginning of the session, and that will set out how we can encourage tree planting to unlock nature recovery benefits, which again are one of the part of the wide spectrum of outputs that tree planting can achieve. I think just touching briefly on the overall ambition of the plan, I think it's worth noting that West Yorkshire currently has a tree cover percentage of 14.5% across the region. The plan up to 2050, as you mentioned, seeks to get to 60.5%. And it's worth noting that there are kind of individual local authority ambitions to sometimes go above that. So if all that's met in cumulative, we could get to 18.5 as a kind of a more stretching target. But it's worth saying that the 16.5% target by 2050 does meet, from a local perspective, the requirements of the Environment Act 2021, which sets a similar target for England. So I think that's the broad essence of the plan. Obviously, I'll take the report as read. I think just to touch on a couple of next steps. So as you mentioned, I think it's been through all the West Yorkshire local authorities now. It does have to go through North Yorkshire and their authorities as well. And the plan is, once that's all completed, there'll be a formal launch of the plan later on this year. I think it was penciled in for August, but I think there's some more comments coming out on that shortly. And then again, just touching on something you mentioned at the beginning, it's a 25-year strategy. It's quite long. It's done at that high-level resolution. The plan is within that to have a series of 5-year action plans. So at the end of the existing one, which was finishing this year, and as I understand it, the White Rose Forest Plan team are refreshing that from a 2025-2030 plan, which will give a bit more detail and a bit more focus on where those immediate delivery steps are going to take place. So that's broadly everything, Chair. Happy to take any questions on that one.
Thank you, Justin. That was very brisk. Can I just say, I enjoyed tremendously, some of you will have seen embedded in the papers, the video about the tree planting on the 5 acres at the Camp Hill School. It brought a little tear to my eye because in some ways that gave added value in terms of the children with disabilities and learning difficulties at that school, learning skills, and getting to hear what the young people themselves said about being out in nature. That was just lovely, actually. But I did have a question, really, and it's topical because the other case study was Marsden Moor on the planting there, and there was a reference to fire breaks. And I thought, how does planting trees help reduce fire? So I don't know if there's anybody on the committee who said exactly that within the report and within the case study. I thought, given what's happened at Marsden Moor with irresponsible people setting light to the moors with barbecues and so on, and we really need fire breaks, do we want to be planting more trees if they immediately get burned down? No. But how does planting trees help fire breaks? Can anybody help me on that?
I'm happy to take it away.
Thank you,
I think there's a broad bit of science in my head, but I don't want to guess. So I'll clarify that and come back to you, Chair. Thank you.
That's a mystery to be solved. Questions, comments? Councillor Patient.
Thank you. And thank you, Chair. And as he said, I imagine this has gone through all of our local authorities for endorsement already. Just picking out a little bit on there, if I can, Justin, is just where it says it ramps up. So it says that 1,500 or thereabouts hectares have already been planted, and then it says that in what years is it? 23-24 alone was 802. So does that mean that ramp up and scale is re-achievable year on year, do you think? Or was that an anomaly? Was that just about maturity of the organisation? Any just bits to pick out on there may well help me file if there's any further comments.
Yeah, thank you, Councillor. I think it's fair to say the delivery trajectory is quite lumpy for this. It's taken a lot of work, I think, kind of historically to get the governance and the kind of working relationships with partners. Is quite a broad partnership, ranging from kind of large landowners to smaller community groups as well. I think equally the priorities between each authority of local area have changed as well. So within that, there's a dynamic between larger landscape scale tree planting and urbanised delivery as well. So that's made it quite difficult. I think the feeling now within certainly the meetings I've been attending with the partnership is that with the kind of the foundations are right now to start accelerating delivery, and that kind of ramping up terminology is something they use quite often in terms of being able to kind of slingshot into more delivery now at scale. Yeah, I think beyond that, I think that's where I'd probably leave it. Yeah.
Thank you. And it's really good to see some little bits of what has been going on, including the video and stuff. I guess what I'd appeal for a little bit more, what would probably be helpful for us, just to inject a little bit of, hesitate to say competitiveness into the process, but innovation, let's call it, instead, is clearly each LA is starting this in a different way. It says urban tree planting has been focused in some areas, Clough Woodlands in others, landscapes for waters via Yorkshire. Water's been done to effect in places where moorland's more prevalent, etc. It'd be great to see case studies more writ large. So, for places like Coaldale, that's probably done more of that landscape work. What does good urban tree planting look like? Where have you applied that? Has that been done in at the same time as things like SUDS? Just a helpful little, case study on a page or two, I think could be a really good bit of an additional help for us. Thank you.
I think it's a very good suggestion, and I was in London last week, and certainly there's a lot of focus on urban tree planting in terms of shade, in the current climate, actually. So be interesting to see what we're doing in West Yorkshire in relation to that. Any, Fatima?
Justin, really loved the aspirational nature of this document and the vision behind it. It also made me very intrigued about a number of things that have created some questions for you, I'm afraid. The first one is, it was really pleasing to see how many people you've engaged with. I suppose the bit that I'm particularly interested in to ensure that the people that don't normally benefit from these kind of environments are thinking and contributing to the work is, when you're talking about the people you've engaged, who are they in regards to demographics, and are we speaking to people that we wouldn't normally speak to about this subject matter? It would be really helpful to get a bit more detail in that space. The other bit was, I wonder whether we're missing an opportunity about connecting the importance of the environment and mental health. So obviously I'm shared with the Health and Care Partnership, and we know that green spaces, particularly during COVID, has a massive impact on people's health and well-being, as well as other health benefits. Are we making that link as strong as we could be? I'm not sure. And then the final bit is, how do we know we're getting to a place where the people that are not on board on this agenda are absolutely ambassadors for it and are getting the benefits? It'd be really helpful to understand how we know we're getting where we want to be, the sort of metrics and bench points by which we know, and if not, how do we repivot? Sorry if they're very big questions, but it was an aspirational document and it stimulated my thinking. Thank you.
Thank you. Justin, you've got a few to go out there, and do your best.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Fatima. In terms of the engagement demographics, we're a part of the partnership, so I'm not into the whole detail, but I can certainly get that from them. I think to give it a bit of a link across into some of the work that we are leading on in terms of the local nature recovery strategy. So that's something that we've done a lot of engagement on upfront, and equally with the more harder to engage with community groups as well. So we've got a piece of work going on at the moment with young people and people that have got kind of accessibility challenges. And equally, we are directly feeding that into policy through the local nature recovery strategy. So it's a similar space in terms of nature recovery, and obviously tree planting is part of that. And we're getting that loud and clear in terms of making sure it's something that they recognise, something that's usable for them as an end product. And then equally, selfishly, from a delivery point of view as well, there's a lot of good work that community groups could do to collaboratively support us on our objectives as an organisation, as a group of partners as well. And then in terms of the link between environment and mental health, again, I can take that away and come back to you in terms of White Rose Forest, but looking at the local nature recovery strategy linkage, and I think we took a paper to the last committee in terms of a broader update, but people is it's one of the three missions within the LLRS that's emerging at the moment. And within that, we recognise there's nature connectedness, to making sure people are feeling connected to nature, caring for it, and then making kind of climate-minded decisions or behaviours, and also reaping those benefits in terms of the mental health angle as well. And people talk about kind of green social prescribing as the big thing, but there's actually just walking into nature and experiencing it, which is kind of the more softer angle of things. But it does unlock a lot of benefits. So we are kind of, I won't say all over it, but we're certainly kind of starting to get into the right place with it. And then equally, once the LNRS is published early next year, hopefully, fingers crossed, when we go into the delivery phase, we'll be kind of springboarding into doing more local-based projects and actually trying to make that real, rather than just stuff from a strategy point of view. So I hope that answers some of your questions, but I'll take the latter points away.
Thank you. And climate justice is that underlying theme of much of what we do in the combined authority, but you'll take some of those away to the White Rose Forest Partnership and put them. Thank you, Fatima. We're asked, sorry, Gideon. Thank you, Gideon. I'm going to take Councillor Rafiq's question as well. And then
It's
come back
more
to
of a
Justin.
comment than question. I mean, it is an aspirational document. I think we've in Leeds managed to plant close to 500,000 trees. And if you look at our ambition to increase from 16% to 33%, the tree and woodland cover, again, it's very ambitious. But I think the challenge is, the more you plant, the more you start running out of spaces and which are suitable for planting, and that's the challenge we all face, I think, to an extent. Not just suitable, but also it has to meet, you got to consult residents as well and their needs as well and what people want green spaces. So it is I think you need to be ambitious, Chair, and that's where we are at, and we'll see what the next 25 years bring.
Justin, would you like to come back with just a few points and then we'll wind this item up?
Thank you, Chair. In terms of so I think, Gideon, you came up with was a comment around the conflicts of land use. So that is something, there's various levels to that. So kind of giving you a few examples. So the local area energy planning work that we're leading on obviously has a land kind of ask within that, and equally the LNRS likewise has potentially kind of land implications. So from our own family documents, we're obviously trying to join those up and align them where possible. I think ultimately there is a level to this where there will be some conflicts, and particularly in terms of development schemes, it'd be something that that landowner or those decision makers from a local planning authority point of view will have to just weigh up in terms of which is the key thing that needs to happen on this piece of land, or in kind of that's a more utopian view, but can land uses coexist? So I know certainly from the engagement we did with the farming and agriculture sector, where we talked about nature recovery, it was quite, initially anyway, it's like, well, you can't have both of them, when actually you can in some scenarios where you're looking at kind of farm fringes, areas of farmland that flood or aren't suitable for livestock. You can do something a bit more of a kind of mosaic basis. So you can get that kind of dual use there, and equally on development sites as well, particularly on larger strategic sites, generally from a planning point of view, you'd want green space in that site anyway from a planning requirement, but for the health and well-being perspective as well. So again, it's kind of making that green space work in the right way, rather than just to satisfy a kind of a policy requirement or a metric in that scenario. So it's something we're working through, but I think ultimately there is that kind of management that needs to take place. And I think that the other tier is, in terms of conflicts, we're at a kind of the business end of the mapping process for the LNRS at the moment, and we're seeing habitat by habitat conflicts emerging through that process as well. So over the next couple of weeks, that's what we're doing now. We're kind of ratifying where those alignment issues, whether they can coexist, whether they need to kind of divorce from each other in some scenarios, to make sure we're giving a clear message to the public and the user base as well. And then I think, and in terms of funding, I don't think anything's been announced in terms of the recent round of funding from DEFRA from White Rose Forest, but I think it was broadly positive, certainly in the short term. But you're right, obviously politics and funding can change. But I think the big thing that's obviously on the agenda at the moment is the biodiversity net gain side of things, and equally the local nature recovery strategy. And we've seen that potentially being a bit of an accelerant in terms of tree planting. And again, kind of trying to facilitate the right tree in the right place through that type of work as well. So I think the dial will change a little bit, maybe less DEFRA core funding, more B&G, but it's about kind of looking at what that cocktail of fund is going to be in the future and just modelling it and mapping it. And again, that's why the White Rose Forest Partnership team are doing those 5-year action plans, which will take those very more detailed, granular snapshots of how that's going to happen on the ground at those particular intervals. And I think that was all the comments.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And really pleased about the 5-year slices in terms of that 25-year plan, and that gives us something very concrete to, or not concrete rather, to hold on to. The committee is asked to note and endorse the White Rose Forest Strategic Plan. Content? Thank you very much. We'll move on then to item 9. This committee does range over a lot of different things, doesn't it? Home Energy, West Yorkshire, Skills and Supply Chain Update. and Michelle is going to give us an update on this particular piece of work. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Thanks. So I'm Michelle Hunter. I'm the Policy and Partnerships Lead in Skills for Business in the Employment and Skills team. And this paper was developed in collaboration with colleagues from the Home Energy West Yorkshire team. The purpose of the paper was just to provide an update on the progress regarding retrofit skills, supply chain and the alignment to broader skills interventions within the construction sector. Specifically, it highlights emerging opportunities and challenges, but also the proposed approach to addressing some of these skills strategies in order to meet the region's net zero ambitions. A few points to highlight from the paper. We know the importance of retrofitting homes is key to achieving net zero targets, and key to that is installing heat pumps and expanding solar capacity. We know that these actions will significantly reduce emissions in the region, and skills is a key enabler in order to do this. Just in terms of skills and workforce challenges, you'll see from the paper that we've highlighted the regional challenges, in particular around skills shortages in the construction and retrofit sectors, significantly around an ageing workforce, gaps in provision, tutor shortages, and uncertainty around pathways, career pathways, but also guarantees of work. We're addressing this at the moment through some of our existing levers in skills. For example, working collaboratively with our local skills improvement partnership, and also utilising our devolved adult skills funding to influence and create that systematic change that's needed. In the paper, we've talked about some of the interventions that are currently taking place. Those include boot camps, utilising our apprenticeship levy, interventions that inspire young people and create those pipelines for green jobs that build on the Mayor's Green Jobs Task Force. Alongside this, recent government announcements have highlighted construction as a national priority. On a local level, we're improving our existing provision, particularly around level 2 and 3 courses. This will hopefully enable us to tackle the skills shortages and get people back into the workforce. You'll see in the paper that we've highlighted we have many assets in our region around construction, but we also have some deep-rooted challenges and complex challenges in this sector as well. So in terms of a recommendation, the paper outlined a proposal to align retrofit skills to the work that's been undertaken by the CA to develop cluster action plans. These are aligned to our local growth plan. And for skills, these will act as a live document to inform provision and future needs and help us to commission effectively in the region. In order to address those skills challenges linked to retrofit and other transformational programmes, we're proposing that we develop a specific construction skills action plan that allows us to address the skills needed for retrofit and other transformational projects. We'd be really keen to share this plan with this committee and also our economy committee as well. So I'll pause there, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you, Michelle. Questions, comments? Martin.
Thanks, Chair. Thanks, Michelle. Martin Broadest from West Yorkshire Housing Partnership. Both in terms of our net zero plans and in terms of the government's ambition to build 1.5 million homes and generally drive a very big growth agenda, construction skills are an absolute massive, probably the biggest single issue that we face. So I can't understate really that this is important, how important this is. From my own perspective, in terms of retrofit work, most of the skills that are needed are actually core skills. So, and obviously those are transferable then into other types of construction activity. So I'm not quite sure to what benefit, certainly at a trade level, that badging things as retrofit specialisms, I'm not sure how helpful that is. The people that are fitting insulation and other products and heat pumps and so on, they're first and foremost plasterers and joiners and plumbers that have developed additional skills. And indeed, for heat pump engineers, I will only specify a heat pump if it's got the endorsement of the manufacturer. The manufacturers will only give the endorsement if the fitter has been on one of their own training courses. That's that. You know, training people as generic heat pump engineers might sound great, but there might be some sort of supply chain challenges that get thrown into that. So, I think the overall thing, as I said again, I can't understate the importance of this agenda. I think there are possibly some nuances which that could maybe feed into the broader growth and the broader house building things, that the other priorities that we have to try and meet.
Thank you. I think there are huge supply chain challenges with construction generally, as well as retrofit, as you rightly say, Gideon.
Yeah, thanks for this. I echo Martin's view on this as well. There's been a number of times where we've had organisations trying to set up specialist retrofit training organisations. Certainly in Kirklees we had one a few years ago, and they fell by the wayside. They couldn't get traction. So now seems like a good time to really start talking to them about this. I think there's one important thing to think about in terms of retrofit, and that is that we are in danger if we're not training people properly, and if we don't get the right materials in place to create more problems with mould and other things as well, and get the right ventilation or the right products in place. And we note that the government's Great British Insulation Scheme is not offering the right products for particularly hard to treat stone housing like we have here. So we need to be very careful with what's being offered and the knowledge that people need to actually take the right products on board.
Thank you, and I'm sure Michelle is going to take those comments away, and I would absolutely endorse, certainly in Calderdale, the number of older stone properties we have, and where we need skills around natural building materials and things like lime plaster and so on. Plastering is plastering, of course, but nonetheless, there are nuances to this, really. I think we can all agree there's a tremendous skills challenge, and that we actually really need to use what we've got here in the Combined Authority in terms of the other committees, the Employment and Skills Committee, the work that we do around adult retraining, apprenticeships, young people. Let's see if we can join those things together. But I think perhaps you're hearing from the this particular committee that there are some further things to think about, which I think are opportunities, actually, in terms of branding and marketing and bringing people on, as well as challenges more generally. Fatima.
I completely agree, Chair. I mean, there's something about the knitting of this to other specific work programmes that I think we're not maximising the opportunities on. But I think it's a really well thought through paper, Michelle. And the point I was going to make was, obviously, with the Healthier Working Lives sort of targeted approach, there's an opportunity for us to really address that skills gap and actually make some targeted interventions to individuals from cohorts of society who are really looking for an opportunity to go into this space, but not quite sure how to do so. I also wonder whether we could maximise some of the Women of West Yorkshire networks in this space as well, and really advocate the fact that this is a sector that women can be represented in and support as well, which I think would be a great thing that I can help with. I suppose my reflection is, though, as a woman who wants to fix all the problems in the world, we can't fix everything. So is there a way in which, particularly when we're thinking about the implications for inclusive growth or the E&D implications, is there a prioritisation that we might need to think about? And also going back to Councillor Rafiq's comments about smart metrics, is there a way in which we can, again, get some clarity about how we know we're getting there with the people that need it the most? I just wonder whether we've got such a solid foundation and this is such great work, but we could, really build on it to make it truly impactful for the communities of West Yorkshire.
Thank you. Misha, Councillor Rafiq.
Yeah, just on that, I mean, I think it's a very, like you said, Chair, it's a very challenging sector with a huge shortage, and there are there are, particularly when it comes to retrofits, the actual levels have actually changed. You know, it's a lot more harder. And if you look at the current market, there are only a handful of contractors or organisations who actually could actually do that. Others aren't trained or qualified to do it. So perhaps I think we need to do some work with the educational institutions, including schools, and encourage more apprenticeships across the board. I think that's the way forward. I remember several years back, there was an acute shortage of, for instance, gas engineers and electricians, and I think somewhat we've kind of overcome that in recent 10, 15, 20 years, and there's no reason why we can't overcome this problem. But given obviously the need to move forward, we need to obviously, the faster we actually train more people, and particularly young people, into apprenticeships, and Fatma's quite right, you know, including women and people from diverse backgrounds as well.
There's a real opportunity there for some start-up businesses. I can definitely see it. Michelle, is there anything you want, any last words you want to come back on before we wind up?
Yeah, thank you. I think those are really helpful comments and really great opportunity to align to the work and health and healthy working life agenda, and also Martin's point around mixed success with what we've had already around attracting people into those specific retrofit courses. I think we'd like to take a more broad approach to this, ensuring that we reach, you know, and align to the work that's happening already across the region. So yeah, thank you very much.
Thank you. Last word, Councillor Patient.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, just to add to that and to some of the comments that have been picked up, I think they're really well rehearsed and right. I think there's a thing here about, and I'm sure it's in the details somewhere, about making sure we capture young people while they're still in the eyes wide open stage. So it's great to go into HE and FE and pull people out of existing workplaces, but I think the sweet spot, having ushered through the school system, is getting them at that kind of, you know, when they're in what I would have called back in the day year 4 high school. It's a higher number than that now, and thinking about making this, I hesitate to say like sexy, but making this seem more appealing, where media and those kind of things will always seem like exciting jobs and are right, and people should be going into those industries, but just a little bit.
Maybe street cred rather than sexy.
Thank you very much. That's much better, and I stand corrected, corrected even. So yeah, just about capturing them at that point to make sure that these plethora of jobs that are going to be really integral are caught at the right point and not missed. And I think there's something about, I'm going to resist the temptation to look back to Greater Manchester and think about the GM back, you know, and what they're doing, but if a similar product in terms of how we want to engage our young people could be brought in, I think that would be massive. Thank you.
Interesting. I'm going to draw that item to close, Michelle. I'm sure we could go on, but thank you very much for that. The committee are asked to note the current progress, and Michelle, if you could take the points that were made, particularly around the question of the metrics and the need to engage people at an early stage, I think would be very helpful. Thank you. Okay, moving on then to item 10. We've done 10 items so far, committee. We're doing well. If we can move on to the Home Energy West Yorkshire evaluation update, and what's in front of you is an overview of the progress that's been made on the domestic net zero evaluation programme. And we know, we have learned that there's no point in doing the work that we're doing without evaluating it, really. And that's the point of this paper in terms of an overview of the progress of the evaluation. And Mia is going to take us through this paper. Over to you, Mia.
Thank you, Chair. So I'm Mia Higgins, I'm Policy Officer in the Home Energy West Yorkshire team, and I'm leading on our evaluation. So it's a domestic net zero evaluation, or the Home Energy West Yorkshire evaluation. So the aim of this paper is to bring an update to the committee and just note the progress around the evaluation. We kicked this off in autumn of last year, and it will be running all the way through to spring of 2027. and it covers all the Home Energy West Yorkshire projects that fall within that time frame. And the goal was to bring them under a single evaluator to kind of promote efficiencies, reduce the costs, and provide a comprehensive overview, as well as being able to, link up the different sort of projects and provide that overall programme evaluation as well, which we're hoping to complete towards the end of this time frame. So we were then hoping to use that information to inform our future projects, take learnings from what we've done, inform our Home Energy West Yorkshire plan as well, and ultimately support our objectives of ensuring that everyone in West Yorkshire can live in a kind of warm, comfortable, low carbon home. So there have been a couple that have fallen out of scope of this time frame, just because the time frame is contracted to that spring 2027 date, and unfortunately a few schemes have been delayed. So the area-based schemes of Wakefield and Kirklees, along with the supply chain project as well, have fallen out of scope. So they will naturally still see evaluations, but it won't come under this sort of overall evaluation. And we're hoping to then use actually that additional resource to kind of support a more in-depth evaluation for the area-based schemes that remain, and also potentially different projects as we go along and we see where we might actually want to explore a bit further than we'd initially planned. So at the moment we've completed the Social Housing Decarbonisation Fund Wave 2.1 evaluation and the Local Energy Area Demonstrator evaluation as well. We also have the Residential Collective Buying Scheme evaluation, which we're hoping to finalise in the next couple of weeks. So we had some kind of key findings come back from them. So in relation to the Social Housing Decarbonisation Fund, we had some data that you can see in the report, so I won't go through it all, but we did have some feedback around what might be useful for us to take forward. So some considerations around improving our stock data, getting better knowledge of our properties, what kind of condition they're in, really would help us to better kind of inform our projects ahead of time. Knowledge sharing as well between providers was identified as a really sort of crucial point that sort of helps the progress of the project. Also the targeting to ensure substantial EPC impacts as well, and the importance of resident engagement really came out, and creating that positive kind of feeling and within communities, as well as the need for the supply chain to be further developed. So we're hoping that this evaluation can support the sort of future work under Warm Homes and also the HUE plan, the Home Energy West Yorkshire plan as well. So in terms of the Local Energy Area Demonstrator, the aim of that was to better understand hard to reach communities and provide them with energy saving and retrofit advice to encourage the uptake of retrofit measures. It generally targeted three main groups. So it targeted older people who were facing deprivation, older people who were also able to pay, and individuals with low or no proficiency in English. And it was found to be fairly effective at engaging these communities, and it really demonstrated the importance of building trust and those local relationships, and really simple and kind of clear communication with residents, as well as having that kind of sustained and long-term relationships that residents could rely on. So we're hoping to use the kind of outcomes from that evaluation to inform the one-stop shop and also the Home Energy West Yorkshire plan as well. Finally, the Residential Collective Buying Scheme. This was aimed at able to pay residents, so it looked to basically through collective buying aim to make solar more affordable, and it covered both solar and battery storage, so you could have either both together or separately. Generally we found there was a very strong satisfaction when we did this evaluation. The residents sort of outlined their goals overall were to reduce energy bills and also to access solar at a cheaper rate. There was some really positive feedback as well around residents saying that the combined authority backing gave them confidence, it gave the scheme credibility, and they felt that they were going to be able to sort of trust the quality of the product. And we also had some really interesting statistics which are in the paper. Around 46% said they wouldn't have explored solar otherwise, and 58% of those who were looking into solar, they said they would have only installed it at least a year into the future. So there was some really positive feedback there as well.
Thank you very much, Mia. I'm just going to pause for a moment and just see if MD wants to perhaps have a declaration of interest. If MD has been involved in any of these schemes. Martin, thank you. Thank you, kind sir. Any questions or comments? Fatima, and then Councillor Rafiq.
Thank you, Mia. This is the first time I've seen the report, so if I ask a stupid question, I apologise in advance, but I've learnt to never assume anything in my line of work. I just wanted to ask for a bit more information regarding some of the demographics as part of the evaluation, because one of the bits of assurance I'm really keen to understand is the people that are the most marginalised or seldom heard individuals are actually a part of the evaluation. So there's some elements of the report where you've broken down older people, which is great, and deprivation, but there's also sort of other elements, people with disabilities, for example, other areas that I'd be really, really interested in. And then the other bit that really drew my attention was the section 7, where it talked a little bit about the EDI implications, and I was just really surprised that there weren't any at all, and just some assurance that we're not missing anything. But thank you.
Mia.
Thank you for those comments. So when we undertook the evaluations, part of what we were looking at was the data that was being collected, and something we've kind of identified is that across the different projects that is really varied. So some projects we might collect a lot more data on factors such as that, and some we might collect a lot less. And I think what was also quite evident is one such as the residential collective buying scheme is aimed at able to pay residents. So if we are looking at models like that, there's almost a limiting factor there in the fact that it is aimed at those. And perhaps that's something that we're looking at considering as part of our Home Energy West Yorkshire plan, is how do we have more consistent data collection? Why are we collecting that data? What's the purpose of it? And also, what are the projects ultimately trying to achieve? So there may be ones such as the residential collective buying scheme that tend to focus a lot more on moving us on the sort of climate aspect, reducing emissions, things such as that, and there may be others with other targets more specifically. So I think that's something that's come out of the evaluations overall, is that consistency of data is something that we really are going to kind of need to look at moving forwards, as well as the objectives that the projects hope to achieve. We did have under the local energy area demonstrator scheme, it was specifically targeted at those groups. So when we did do that sort of feedback, we did the interviews as part of that evaluation, we did look to get a kind of representative sample across those groups to really understand how they were impacted and get specific feedback as well on how they interacted with the project and what barriers maybe they faced, and we're hoping to take that all forward in our learnings. So there's a lot more sort of broken down in the reports and stuff in that detail. Also, when we carry out the kind of case study interviews as well, we try and make sure that we get a range of people in terms of how they've engaged with the scheme, whether they've come forward or not, but also making sure that we try and get a representation across the whole of West Yorkshire as much as possible. Some schemes might be more we might have had more recipients in certain areas, and also to try and reflect as sort of diverse a range as possible. So we do consider those, but yeah, ultimately that has been something that has come back to us, is that there's a bit of inconsistency across the projects, and a lot of them have sort of predetermined set goals, so we might not be collecting certain information, and where is it necessary to collect that as well, because if we are collecting personal information, we naturally have to have a justification for collecting that. So also looking into, if we are going to collect that, how do we have a sort of justified reasoning for doing so?
Thank you. That's a good explanation of the learning that so far already. Thank you for that. I've got Councillor Rafiq and then Neil.
Thank you, Chair.
Then Martin.
Thank you. Mine's regarding 3.16, which is the residential collective buying scheme. I think the report talks about collecting buying scheme for batteries in solar and relaunching. I think we need to work closely with the various local authorities in order to amplify communication and a wider take-up on that.
Thank you. I'm going to take Neil and Martin and then ask somebody, Liz or Mia, depending on whether it's about the data collection and evaluation or the actual schemes themselves. So first of all, Neil.
Thank you, Chair. Just a question about the collective buying scheme. Are there checks and balances in place with regard to the ethical supply chain for the solar products that are being available via that? Because it does draw a lot of attention, in particular in the media.
Indeed. Okay, thank you. I'm going to come to Martin and then I'm perhaps going to ask Liz to pick up some of those points. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. It would be, I'm sure that other partners in the West Yorkshire Housing Partnership would be very keen to see the results of the evaluation of Wave 2.1 if that's possible to share. And I suspect I know the answer to this because the timescale for the evaluation was relatively short. But is there any plans to do a sort of a more longitudinal evaluation of the impact of some of the retrofit measures for residents? And in particular, I'm thinking around health and well-being. As is highlighted in the report, take-up of retrofit programmes is a real barrier to delivering our net zero ambitions, getting people interested in it. Retrofit is not a street cred word. Chose the word carefully there. And I firmly believe that pushing the health and well-being benefits of that investment is going to be a far better sell to our customers, our residents, than any sort of net zero or energy efficiency or other ethereal arguments. So the more evidence that's available to support that would help considerably, I think.
Thank you, Martin. Well, I'm going to come to Liz or Jess in terms of, I've got ethical questions, ethical supply chain questions. I've got a question about sharing data. I've got questions about improving take-up. And I've got a question about health and well-being. Jess?
Thank you, Chair. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Jess McNeil. I'm Head of Home Energy West Yorkshire at the Combined Authority. So, Neil, just coming on to your point around ethical supply. Yes, any installer that we work with, whether directly through the Residential Collective Buying Scheme or the support that we provide for West Yorkshire Housing Partnership works, all installers have to comply with the Modern Slavery Act. And we ensure that they've done that through robust due diligence. They have to provide their annual statements. So it's obviously a tricky position that it's difficult to get away from, but we do ensure that those ethical checks and balances are done for all of our installers before we do engage with them. Just coming back to Martin's point about health and well-being, you'll see in the workshop that we're going to go into after the formal meeting around some of the language that we're looking to change to engage residents, because you're absolutely right. There's a different reason for people getting involved. Climate and sort of the environment sometimes it isn't what people want to engage with. So how do we broaden that message around the benefits, the health, the well-being, the reduction in bills? It's quite broad. So hopefully you'll see in the workshop how we're looking to try and change our language to engage as many residents as we can to be actively involved in retrofit. And apologies, Chair, I didn't quite catch the question on data collection.
Are we going to be sharing, given this evaluation is a useful set of information and helps us to address some of the questions about what works, what doesn't, how do we accelerate pace, how do we scale things up. Are we going to be sharing some of the data that we've collected?
Yes, we will have exec summaries of the evaluations that we've concluded. They just weren't quite ready for this meeting this afternoon, but when we have a more comprehensive set of reports that will be informative to committee, we'll certainly bring that at a future meeting.
And can I just remind you about Councillor Rafique's point about take-up, improving take-up?
Thanks, I'll take that one, because if we kind of cast our minds back to when we launched the collective buy-in scheme, it was interwoven, let's say, with various general elections and other things, which meant that, and I think we need to, sometimes when we're doing evaluation, you need to look at the context within which sometimes things are launched, and we would probably do things differently, and we would certainly welcome greater, and we'll look at this, comms through our local authority partners than we probably did last time. So yeah, thank you, Councillor Veek. That's a great offer and we'll take it up.
Thank you. Gideon.
Yeah, thanks for that. I just wondered, in terms of the broader thing, how we're looking at this in terms of carbon and our carbon budgets, and how that's going to fit in to give us an idea of what the impact that would be if we were to roll it out over the period, and what that would give us in a benefit, and if there's any work going to be going on that. Thanks.
Mia, you've told us about your quant work and your qual work. in terms of some of the future scenario projection? Is there any planned work on that?
Thank you. So the residential collective buying scheme was one where we did measure that kind of carbon coming back. I think one of the key things, having looked across these evaluations, is again the consistency of data. So the methodology that's used in order to do that, obviously it's somewhat predictive as well. We can't be wholly sure. So the consistency of how do we measure that across different schemes as well. And particularly for things such as smaller measures, it might be that collective buy-in is an easier way for us to actually measure that if we are focusing on one technology. So this one was a pilot scheme, but there were actually in some of the feedback sort of suggestions from residents, maybe we could roll this out with other technologies, or we could roll out future iterations of this. So I think for ones like that, the data capture, we do have the kind of carbon saving estimates sort of within that report. And that's something that we could look to reflect. But I think more broadly across all of the different projects that we deliver, there's perhaps sort of different challenges in how we collect that data and the consistency of it across the whole programme.
Thank you, Mia. I'm going to allow Gideon to come back, and I'm going to allow Councillor Rafiq to come back, because I'm a sucker for all these questions you've got in that discussion. And then I'm going to draw this to a close. Gideon.
Thank you. Mine actually isn't a question for you. It's an awareness thing. In Kirklees, we have something called Energy Neighbours. Sorry, I have to get the right one going, which is a 3-year project looking at how we communicate and how people get on board with energy. I can put you in touch with the people. It's a big lottery funded project. It might be worth you having a chat with them.
Might be worth all of us having a chat. Councillor Rafiq, just a short one, please.
Yeah, it's a short one actually. Just on the one-stop scheme, there's not seemed to be any details. It may be that it's been covered in previous when I wasn't here, but it is key to, particularly when it comes to retrofit for all tenures.
Liz.
If you can hold your suspense, we'll be covering that in the workshop, because we've definitely got some plans to come forward. So yeah, thank you.
Right, committee are asked to note the progress of the evaluation programme, and more power to your elbow, Mia. We really need this work to be done. Thank you very much. Okay, we're moving on to the last 2 transport-related items, and I want to welcome Helen Illerton, who has actually been sitting through the whole committee to do these last items, and you're very welcome, Helen, and I hope the discussion and contributions have been edifying so far. And just by way of introduction for those people who are new to the committee, we spent some time at, I think it was committee before last, talking about the fact that transport are the biggest carbon emitters in the region, and the way in which there are big plans in terms of franchising, carbon reduction in the transport sector within West Yorkshire, and how we might, within this committee, first of all, gain a better understanding in terms of what's happening, what are the stages and sequencing of what's happening, and how can we add value to that process, and also, without being scrutiny, ask the questions and interrogate what's happening in terms of making sure that we're joined up as a combined authority in terms of working forward. What we've got in front of us is a short paper which first of all introduces the statutory consultation on the new Mayor's West Yorkshire Local Transport Plan, and they were then going on to a second paper which is about bus franchising. And one of the things I must say about the local transport plan, obviously the Department for Transport has a transport plan. There are regional transport plans, and then there are hyper-local transport plans in the district, and they all use a particular language, and they have their own particular set of abbreviations, and Helen is going to unfold this world for us and tell us how it all works. Over to you, Helen.
Thank you, and thank you very much. It's actually been really interesting being here for the full thing because, as you say, around transport interaction across the whole agenda. So, hello everybody. I'm Helen Elton. I'm Head of Transport Policy at the Combined Authority, and as Councillor Scullion says, here with a paper around the local transport plan. So I think a bit of a kind of background as to what it is and where we are and where we're going next. So we are in the process of developing a new local transport plan for West Yorkshire. This is a region-wide, so across all of West Yorkshire, this is a region-wide statutory document that applies and sets out the policy framework for how we deliver transport across the piece. As Councillor Scullion has just said, obviously the districts are the component highway authorities and bring forward their own kind of delivery and proposals about how they want to roll out and build on what we say. The statutory framework that we put forward through this local transport plan then guides that future delivery. The reason we're coming today, and I'll set out the detail behind it in a moment, is we are due to start our statutory consultation, which is our 12-week consultation on the overall policy framework on the 29th of July for 12 weeks. So that's a week today, and we'll be out to consultation for 12 weeks. This builds on the engagement that we undertook last year around the vision and objectives, and we had a really good 8-week period last year where we were talking to communities, talking to committees, and talking to a lot of people, statutory stakeholders as well, and had some really good feedback that we've since fed into, and it's really helped us structure the policy framework that we're now coming back to consult on formally. A new local transport plan is needed because our current local transport plan was adopted in 2017 and a lot has changed since then, not least the fact that we have a new mayor who has new powers and has accelerated and therefore changed how we deliver and our focus on delivery. But also we've had COVID and the impact of that has had on travel patterns and just how we operate as a region has significant impact. And also to add to that, changing governments and changing focus around kind of funding and how we are devolution, etc., all means that we need to think about how we do our policy framework locally. So the local transport plan that's to be consulted on presents a new kind of policy framework that's being developed alongside a number of key transport programmes, and I think this is an important part around the context for the policy framework. So we are already in a programme to develop a mass transit system for which phase 1 was engaged on and route options were engaged on last summer alongside the vision and objectives for the local transport plan, and further consultation on a preferred route will be consulted on next year. We're also in a programme for delivering bus franchising and due to have all services across West Yorkshire on contracts to us within 2028. So those two are two significant kind of strategic priorities that mean our policy framework needs to enable delivery. We have also started to embark upon a structure along with Great British Rail around a programme for rail reform and how that therefore then looks at how we want to be involved and manage and oversee what happens on our rail network. And lastly, we have launched a new transport brand, the Weaver brand. Now the Weaver brand is a public-facing way of defining our transport network, but it is critical to how we view our policy framework, but how we also view our public transport network and then our transport network overall. So I think it's fair to say this local transport plan presents kind of a good opportunity to build on these strategic priorities and set out a policy framework that will enable delivery, but it is also making sure that we can bring those things together in a way that is understandable for the public and understandable for us all to engage with practically. So the vision that kind of is set out in the paper, but also built upon as the basis for the local transport plan, is to create the Weaver network as a leading transport network for West Yorkshire, and benefiting people, places and the planet by embedding sustainable transport choices to enable the economy to grow. So the local transport plan takes on board it's built on 4 objectives and built on kind of how it will support and help deliver our local growth plan, our West Yorkshire plan, and then sits alongside the climate environment plan as well, and the future spatial development strategy. So it's basically looking at kind of how we can make sure the policy framework that is statutory for transport helps to deliver some of the work towards helping deliver some of the outcomes as part of the wider policy offer from the Combined Authority. And from kind of specifically from this kind of committee's perspective, transport is a significant contributor to carbon and particulate emissions, for example. So kind of putting in place and kind of how that links to kind of the 4 objectives, making sure we can build in policies and frameworks and delivery from both a capital infrastructure but also wider behaviour change to increase use of the Weaver network, to reduce emissions across tailpipe but also across wider polluting modes is really important. So in order to present the new local transport plan for adoption next year, it's important we hear from as many people as possible across all kind of all society in terms of the public, but also stakeholders as well and other interested parties. Thank you.
Thank you, Helen. There's a lot there and there's a lot in the paperwork. Any early comments? Go on, John. Thank you.
Hi, I'm John Clark. I'm a private representative, but I also work for a company called Cummins, so we make diesel engines, so I probably should declare an interest at the same time, right, in terms of these pieces. But interest particularly when looking at the report and on the bus franchising piece, what was quite surprising to me was actually seeing the number of vehicles that were Euro 4 and earlier that were still in the fleet. Because if you go to a Euro 6 diesel specification, you will reduce NOx numbers by 90% and particulate matter by 50% and fuel economy by 10 to 15%, right? So it's a big change in terms of reduction. The other piece was there was no mention about the Bradford hydrogen facility that's been set up, and how will that be used to power buses in the future.
Thank you. And of course, we're also touching on the next report in terms of the franchising, bus franchising. Over to you, Helen, to deal with those questions. And I have to say, this question of Euro 4 buses and so on is one that exercises us particularly outside Leighton Bradford, actually, in terms of the age of some of the stock that we've got access to at the moment.
Thank you, and there's some really valid points in that. So Alex Clark, if you want to just come round, Alex, because
yes,
it's kind of crossing over onto the next paper around franchising. But the fleet, the bus fleet that you're specifically referring to, is something that we've been for a number of years working with operators to improve the emissions, if you like, increase the Euro standard, if you like, to make that a better offer across West Yorkshire. And we have been successful with, albeit in certain regions, but we have been successful with specific Department for Transport funding to bring in zero emission buses across, for example, Leeds and Bradford have benefited through their through a number of depots. As part of franchising, which I'll pass to Alex, our intention and our aim is to bring zero emission vehicles much broader across our fleets.
I do wonder, committee, because I think we're probably going to, as John has just done, we're probably going to stray between here's our local transport plan, which we've got to put in to the Department for Transport as the overarching strategic document, and nestling within that is the bus franchising, the important locally bus franchising scheme. I wonder if perhaps we should hear from Alex in terms of introduction to the bus franchising paper, and then take questions around, because I know that some people have been waiting to ask questions, but whether we could take those together. How does that sound? Can you live with that? Okay, Alex, over to you. You're on.
Okay, great. Thank you. Afternoon members of the committee. So Alex Clark, I'm one of the heads of service within the Bus Franchising Directorate of the Combined Authority. So thank you for having us today. And I think you're absolutely right, Chair, that there's a strong connection here between the programme to deliver bus franchising, which myself and the team are looking after, and our broader local transport plan to which it needs to contribute. So I'll take the paper as broadly read, but perhaps just for those slightly less familiar, a bit of an outline in terms of the franchising programme as a whole. So actually the Mayor took a decision in March 2024 to bring buses back under local control by introducing a franchising scheme. What that means in practice is that kind of routes, frequencies, fares and the overall standards for buses in the region will be set by the Combined Authority, so not by private operators, who instead be contracted to run services on the Combined Authority's behalf. The objectives for that bus reform assessment that kind of inform that decision are set out in the paper, but include a key theme of green and better vehicles, recognising both the challenge of encouraging modal shift and its impact on the environment, but also introducing zero-emission buses to lower emission standards. And as already rightly been pointed out, we've included some information in the paper on the current fleet makeup in West Yorkshire, which is not too dissimilar to some of the challenges nationally, but we have some particular local challenges at the moment in terms of the replacement rate of vehicles during the last few years, particularly driven by things like COVID-19 and a reduced investment from private operators. So the programme for implementing franchising covers kind of 4 years from the Mayor decision to the introduction of all of the first franchise contracts for local services in West Yorkshire by the end of 2028. Since that decision in March last year, we've obviously been moving at pace through phase 1 of the programme up to the beginning of first procurements, which will be later in this year. The Combined Authority has already taken a number of decisions during that time, including approvals and delegations around lotting, so setting the basis for the bus services to be provided within franchise contracts, on depots, so setting out the approach to the provision of depot facilities, and on fleet in developing a route to deliver the right number of vehicles for both the planned and future franchise contracts. And there's a further Combined Authority paper coming later this week to the Combined Authority meeting with a central focus on the procurement approach. So lots of activity live at the moment, and there's some more detail on some of those strategies within the paper, but hopefully that just gives a good overview of where we're at with the programme and opens up that wider discussion. Thank you.
Thank you, Alex, and sorry to spring that upon you. And thank you for setting out the sequencing and the components of that bus franchising. And I think one of the messages is there are no overnight miracles, but there is a process for taking back control of our bus services. Now, Gideon has been very patient, and he's definitely first, and then Councillor Sokal I'll hear from.
Thank you, Chair. I got the experience of working as a bus driver myself. I work on the bus for 40 years. Yeah. When the deregulation of buses brought in 1986, what happened that time? Government was saying it's a competition. It wasn't competition. What happened those days? The cowboys, operators, they step in. They were allowed to run the buses there with even one or two or buses, not a good standard buses, yeah, running in front of the main bus service, which was 3 minutes or 2 minutes. They actually, those cowboy bus operators, they destroyed the bus services which were already running before 1986. So I'm well pleased now the West Yorkshire Combined Authority bringing back the public bus service to the public control. That's point. But I want to make sure. I want to remind that it should not happen again under the franchise rule. Yeah, I read somewhere it's a competition. Yeah, I don't want to go back to the competition where the cowboy bus operator came in and destroyed them. Who suffered that? It's the main bus company suffered that. As a result of that, they withdrawn the buses from the routes, and rather than going direct bus to one place to other place, they started running bus survey going through the street, going through the village, which would take 1 hour journey to take 2 hour journey. The public needs the bus service. They need a bus service fast and quick and shorter time journey, not like the journey from Huddersfield to White Rose. You come, it take 2 hours. Used to take 1 hour. Now you're going through. They come to take 2 hours. That's the why the bus company losing commercial routes. Yeah, because the people don't want to stay on the bus for two hours. So they think it's better to go by some taxi or other places. So I want to make sure it should not happen again and under the franchise system now.
Thank you, Councillor Sokol, and those messages of 86 really do need to be learned. I'm going to take Gideon and then I'm going to come back to Alex and Helen. Gideon.
Yeah, thanks a lot. My first question actually was starting with commercial vehicle fleets and how we're going to support and nurture those for actually reducing or changing their operating fleet. And sort of linking to that, maybe then start thinking about, we've got park and ride, we're talking about other forms of charging infrastructure, especially bus networks. And are we thinking about whether those could be used for not only the bus network, but also for other fleet users as well, on the basis that they are going to have the grid infrastructure there to cover that. And then the other one I was thinking about, we've got a number of local plans that are going to get updated shortly and are being updated shortly. And are you talking to the local councils about land use and where they're allocating land for things like the mass transit points and also multimodal hubs and things like that, because we're in danger, if we're not careful, of having something that would have been ideal for a multimodal hub is actually now allocated as a housing estate or something like that. So, thank you.
Thank you, Gideon. I actually know the answer to the second part of that. But, Helen and Alex, very pertinent points from Councillor Sokal about the kind of things that happened in 86, and as we go forward into bus franchising, seeking assurance in terms of some of those things not being allowed to happen again, and questions about operating fleet and spatial strategies and revisions of local plans from Gideon.
Great. So if I take the first two of those questions and then perhaps pass to Helen. So absolutely. Wasn't around in 86, so can't comment on kind of what that felt like at the time. But I think the key thing to take in terms of introducing franchising is it gives much greater control to that setting of the route, setting of the frequencies of service delivery. So that ability for operators to change or to compete on the road is really replaced with competition for franchise contracts, and that's at the heart of the franchising proposition. So hopefully that gives members some comfort in terms of the approach that we're taking there as we introduce our first set of franchising contracts. And obviously there's a longer term piece to do to look at the network more generally once we've introduced franchising in West Yorkshire. Just on picking up the point in terms of charging infrastructure for buses and using it elsewhere, that is already happening with some of the private operators that are doing that at the moment with business-to-business charging in some of the depots. Certainly something that we're giving consideration to in terms of the depot work about what else you might be able to do. Buses are often charged overnight, which leaves kind of capacity during the day. Obviously there are arrangements to get right in terms of how you make that happen, but it's certainly something that's being considered.
Thank you, Alex. And just to add to that, just more broadly, and picking up a point that was made earlier on in the committee, we did, via the Transport Committee, in April adopt our electric vehicle infrastructure strategy, and we'll be bringing our on-street guidance for approval to Transport Committee tomorrow. That's focused on cars, but I just wanted to flag it here because that helps us set out how we're delivering our local electric vehicle infrastructure funding, which we received from government 2 years ago. So just aligned to kind of the questions around kind of spatial planning and the policies within the local transport plan. To answer your question, yes, we are working with districts, and we've been working with districts very closely. The local transport plan has been co-developed with our district partners, and mass transit, specifically as its policy framework, is baked into the local transport plan. So transit orientated development is a policy that we have in there to help enable and work together across that piece. I should also make reference at this point to the spatial development strategy, which will be coming forward and become a, if you like, a statutory document that will be a working relationship between us and the district partners as well.
Perhaps I could add that the spatial strategy, I think, has been to most of the districts, because when you look, exactly as Gideon said, when you look across the 5 districts, we're all at different stages of our local plans, you know, already being reviewed, you know, various stages. And of course, the danger is that you allocate land or in a different way, and that you fetter the ability for mass transit, trams and other transport hubs and interchanges and so on to take place. So that's gone to each of the districts to take a look at. Helen and Alex, can you also pick up the point, and I can't remember whether it was Councillor Rafiq or Martin, in terms of just addressing this question of the fact that we still have Euro 4 diesel within the system, in terms of the plans, the fleet strategy, where does hydrogen sit, what the expectation is in terms of changing and decarbonising that fleet, and over what sort of period?
Yeah, okay, so if I pick up those points. So in terms of kind of our bus reform assessment, we set out the approach that we'll be working towards zero emission fleet by 2036, and that's actually already consistent with our bus service improvement plan. What we're looking at the moment, and obviously these are kind of active considerations at the moment, recognising we're in this transition phase, is what does that period look like in terms of between now and then, and also the phasing out over time of those kind of lower standard Euro emission vehicles. Clearly, as we're not yet there in terms of contracting phase, the exact final makeup of fleet isn't clear, so apologies if there's kind of some vagueness in my answer. Members will recognise as well, obviously, that we're currently in a process of kind of acquisition around both fleet and vehicles, so there's some information that I won't be able to kind of go into today, but certainly the plan is there to look at that kind of vehicle specification for the start of contracts, but then also how do we evolve and move over time? How do we cascade vehicles in a different way to what we see at the moment in terms of that kind of private operator footprint, but very much in view. And then in terms of hydrogen, again, it's something that's in view. We've been agnostic in terms of our assessment, in terms of what the kind of favoured long-term view is of bus fuel. We've done a study looking at kind of hydrogen, as well as obviously looking at the options around battery electric vehicles, and again, some of that further detail was in the fleet strategy we brought to the Combined Authority in May.
Thank you. There's a lot to think about, and apologies, John, it was you who raised the question of diesel. From what you're saying, it does look as though, certainly in that short-term transitional period, a minority of vehicles are not going to be able to be electric, and we would aim for them to be at least Euro 6 in terms of diesel, and hydrogen a possibility, we don't know. But I think one of the concerns of the smaller districts is that we don't become a repository for older diesel vehicles, really is a key thing.
I will, thank you. Hi, Jim Cardwell, I work for Northern Power Grid. I was, sort of a compliment for the paper, because I like the way it's both very integrated, a very wide scope as well. You've got a lot of things going on that table. And also the way it's integrated into other bits other than transport, as it needs to be. I guess that it was a question about the sort of engagement with the people who live or work in West Yorkshire, and how you plan to do that. Because I can see flickers of it as I read through the different initiatives. You know, for example, I've seen comms go out on the Weaver network and that branding that you talked about. I guess I just wondered, how are you approaching that whole engagement? Because it's very visionary. It's looking out far into the future, and there's some big sort of broad brush strokes of less reliance on the car, more reliance on alternative. So there's some, there's a sell, and there's a taking people with you kind of on that. So I just wondered how you were approaching that question.
Over to you.
Thank you. I think it's a really good question, because there's two levels to it, and I think that's one of the challenges, but also one of the opportunities. Obviously, if you consult on a policy framework on face value, it doesn't really wash. So it's about how are you making it real to the public at large. So the launch of the Weaver brand and and therefore kind of our brand around our network and our transport network gave us a real opportunity to provide us with a very visual ability to kind of sell and really show people what we mean and how we're going to demonstrate. So as you'll see as the materials come out next week, and through what we've been using through what's called our Talking Transport events, which we've just concluded this round yesterday, we are showing two levels of kind of visuals. A high level kind of tube style map, which shows in broad terms how the network, mass transit, bus, rail, kind of work together, but also then how they are then integrated through a lot of images to kind of really link between that network and kind of your door-to-door journey. So some of the physical improvements that are more likely to happen within your neighbourhood areas. So from a visual perspective, we're trying to demonstrate how this may look in the future. From a practical perspective, we're doing a number of things. So we are there's a number of online webinars we'll be holding, but also kind of very in person, in public, trying to get out to a lot of community events and a lot of locations across all of West Yorkshire, different types, so from high footfall places through to kind of focus groups and different levels of conversation. So a full spectrum of just flyering and trying to catch people, but also kind of having much longer conversations and discussions and panel events as well. So as well as online. So kind of trying to give that broadest opportunity. We're also working with the voluntary sector groups, if you like, to try and kind of expand our reach to some of the seldom heard groups. So one of the things we we've adapted from our approach to how we engaged last year. Was we felt we didn't hear from enough broad groups last year. So we've working in partnership with a voluntary sector organisation who has really good connections with much broader groups. So that's been a really positive experience in helping us to really spread our conversation. Because it really is about the conversation here and understanding kind of how we can make it real to people and how they can really interact with what we want to deliver and see.
Thank you, Helen. Thank you for the question, Jim. Councillor Patient.
Thank you, and yeah, that's really helpful. Just to add a few things that were picked up via our via the Talking Transport thing that you ran the other day. This one happened to be in Hebden Bridge, which was quite well attended. A couple of the comments that came there from the community were two things really. Number one being to use your existing assets, so things like bus shelters and stuff, to amplify those stories, to get it out to more people so more people can access it. That's the digital side of it, whether that's through QR or whether that's just through links or whatever. Strikes me as an easy achievable win. And the second thing really was the idea about utilising the people that you have in the communities, and that's elected members. You know, giving them the materials, not just digital packs, but also flyers, posters and stuff that they might need to then go where you can't go, because with the best will in the world, I know you will, I know you're connecting with the voluntary community sector and doing that work, but there are other places you can get to, other people you can connect to with that hyper-local sort of knowledge. So, you know, use us and abuse us, so to speak. There's a fair few hundred of us, I think, isn't there, in West Yorkshire? So we're out there. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Patient. I think just to that first point, yeah, we are trying to understand kind of how we can get things out, if you like, in different formats across different ways. And as Alex will know, the 14,000 bus stops across the region are one way. It's just about how we manage some of this across some of our key places where we get a higher footfall across the bus stops. Just on your second point, yes, absolutely, and I'm hoping you've had an invite in for the Mayor's briefing to the ward councillors on Thursday evening, and that session is to allow the Mayor to talk to all ward councillors and really bring them into the fold to help you articulate the messages and go from there. Excellent. And go from there to help us spread the word and get your engagement accordingly.
Thank you. And I'm thinking this committee is looking, casting envious eyes on those 14,000 bus stops. And I think Home Energy West Yorkshire is one of the first in the queue in terms of advertising for the combined authority. I'm conscious of the time, folks, and I'm also confident that this is a dialogue, this is a conversation, isn't it, in terms of what the combined authority, as we said about some of the skills development earlier, this is a dialogue between the different parts of the combined authority that's going to continue. And I hope you found the questions and the challenges useful, really. But we would like you to come back, actually, if that's all right. You don't have to stay for the whole committee, but that's extremely useful. Committee, we have to note the local transport plan for the statutory consultation that's coming up. We're asked as a committee to publicise the consultation with our own networks, really, in terms of the local transport plan. So encourage as wide a range as possible. And let's face it, all of your organisations and indeed your councils, we all employ lots of people. They travel to their places of work very often when they're not working at home. And make sure that actually people do, as wide a range of people as possible, do have their say. And in terms of the bus franchising, this was the first, Alex, of other updates that we hope we're going to have. And I think you can hear from the tenor of the questions some of the things that this committee are particularly interested in. So if the committee are happy to note those two reports with those comments. Thank you. Thank you, Helen. Thank you, Alex, very much. I'm going to close in a moment the formal part of this meeting, and the next meeting of this committee, it seems too far away, doesn't it, actually, is on the 4th of November. This has been very much first meeting of the municipal year, very much noting and endorsing, seeing progress. I think the next meeting, and it's already been trailed actually, some of the things that are very much coming to this meeting, and we look forward to that. I know that some of you have to go. We're going to have a short break, and there's then an opportunity for a private members workshop, just updating members on some additional items. So thank you all very much for your contributions, and look forward to working with you. Whether you're a main member or a sub, look forward to working with you and to seeing the officers again next time on the 4th of November. Thank you.